just need these for a minute or two. Hi. Oh, man. I spent that whole 7 minutes just going, just talk from the heart. Don't be nervous. Everything's going to be fine. And then I'm like so sweaty instantly. I know. I love you too. Thanks. Thanks. Bobby gave me lots of really good advice for this. He said, just be loud enough. And that was it. It's like, come on, dude. So if you don't know who Bobby is, because you haven't been here before, he's well, he likes to call himself the supreme leader. And he is. He's the head pastor. Well, he doesn't. It's a joke. He's just a wonderful teacher. And he makes the most beautiful slides for us to look at while he teaches us all these amazing things that he weaves together. And I'm not going to do that because, well, I planned to spend all day yesterday getting my slides and my points together. But at about 7:30 in the morning, I found a baby squirrel on the side of the road. And so I spent most of the day. These are starting to fog up. Okay, here we go. Just hanging out with a baby squirrel. Is he in here? Do we still have him? Can I just hold him while I do this? I think that would help me. I'm going to hold this is Cashew. Here, put him back in his little pouch here. And we found him and he was bleeding and shivering. And he's the best, but I'm just going to put him in here and that's going to help me. What? Oh, I got him. You just kind of drop him in and then he finds his little place. I always wanted to have a pet that just lived on my body. So my dreams are coming true this week. And being a pastor and teaching was never really one of my dreams. So I don't know exactly what's happening here, but here we are. So, yeah. But baptism is a really cool subject. And it's a really weird kind of mystical ceremony that happens, Jesus, it's the start of his work. He goes and finds the crazy dude in the wilderness eating bugs, and he dunks him underwater, and then the whole thing begins. So last week, if you were here, Bobby talked about Exodus, and I recently watched, what's that movie called? The Moses movie, the cartoon one. Prince of Egypt. I recently watched Prince of Egypt, so I've got a really good grasp on that story as well for this morning. So, and Bobby was teaching us about how it's actually the Reed Sea, not the Red Sea, which the Reed Sea is not altogether that deep, so I don't really know how that all works, but in the cartoon, when they part the Red Sea, that's really, really great. And he was talking about leading, how when you're led through that's a baptism in a way, coming through the water. Hebrews, a people that have been through the water. So I figured we'd pick up at the next installment of that story. Does anybody know what happens right after they get to the other side of the sea? Anybody remember? 40 years. Right. That's what I was thinking about. And I was Googling, and apparently the distance they traversed in the 40 years was an 11-day journey. So they were lost big time. And that's cool, because when I think about my own baptism, which was about a year and a half ago, we went out to the springs, and Bobby really took me under his wing when I was still a pretty lost boy. So that Springs trip, I was, still sneaking off into the woods to get high. When I was asked about my baptism on my ordination 6 months ago, I totally floundered the question because I was like, what am I supposed to say about that experience? I don't really remember. And I do remember, but it isn't even really about the memory as much as like, when I growing up in the church, what I was taught about baptism is that it's this public declaration of your faith. So you're telling everybody, like, I believe this now, and I want everybody to know that, which is part of it. Right? There's a crowd gathered out there in the wilderness, but it is also out there in the wilderness. So the real magic of it is this internal commitment, I think. This invitation of Holy Spirit and Christ consciousness to enter us, which is something that after Yeshua received that, I was noticing that so many of the rest of his miracles and the rest of his stories center around water. He walks on water, he spits in a blind man's eyes, he turns water into wine. There's a real power in water. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Hidden Messages of Water. Anybody ever read that book? Actually, I do have a couple slides. Ben, will you put that crystal slide up there? This is just one. He's got like 1 million photos. This cool scientist guy that runs these experiments with water. He takes 2 bottles of water, tapes a message on one. One is you're a fool, and the other is I love you. And it's, as you can imagine, that's kind of the A-B. I love myself some hardcore music and moshing around every once in a while, but the results of that on the water crystals were a little disheveled, and classical music was a little bit more pure. But his whole point of his book is the way water receives and carries information. And we're 95% water. And as we live our lives, we become less and less moist. I couldn't even finish that sentence, I'm sorry. And when we really set our intentions with water, it can allow miracles to happen and healing, I don't know how to teach like Bobby does. I don't know how he has. He was the Indiana 1914 blue Bible boy, blue ribbon. I don't know, that's what it is. If you're watching, Bobby, we know you know that Bible. I'm not, no, I know. Thank you. I'm not trying to be. Well, I am in a lot of ways. I wear a lot of his clothes. And I love him, I love that guy. And he taught me a lot. And I think baptism, I'm honored to get to speak about it for a few minutes during this series, because what I'm getting to about my experience with baptism is that I asked him a few questions about it. But it wasn't a theological leap, and it wasn't something I really even on any kind of intellectual level understood why or what I was doing. But when I look back at that time, it's one of the most significant days of my life, because it marked a significant change. And I loved that, the end of the poem Shayla read. You're okay, bud. Sorry, I'm having some kicks right now. um, that it ended with water being our first mother, because there's so much, the songs we sang this morning too, really wanting to be in that kind of divine feminine energy that is so often lacking in our Christian tradition, of understanding that so much of what Yeshua and his followers did, miracles happened and changes in attitude happened and changes in consciousness happened, and we still don't really understand it. We're still here 2,000 years later, arguing and disagreeing and starting new factions of Christianity because, well, it must have meant this, and it must have meant this, and it must have meant that. And so when I say that I'm honored to talk about this for a minute, it's to try to talk about baptism from rather the thread of what it means. Just that Jesus was a master teacher and a master healer. He gave us things like the Sermon on the Mount, and he also spit in a dude's eyes. He's a far out character. So there's a lot of cool things in the Bible, and I do read it. I usually stick to Psalms and John, because if you flip open to certain passages of the Bible, without someone there to guide you through, you can get pretty off course. I remember doing that a few years ago before I was kind of back in Christendom and just opening to blessed are the ones who bash their enemies' babies' heads against the rocks or something. And I was like, nope, I'm good. I'm going to read some poems. This is a very human, very magical book, and we're all very blessed to have somebody who has done his homework. But I noticed one cool little connection, and that is this story in John that has a very specific number. And so I also had to do some Googling, because I was reading this other book that was talking about them being lost in the desert for 38 years. I was like, it's 40. I've heard 40 my whole life. But there is some passage in Exodus that calls it 38. I guess maybe they spent a year or two getting out of town or something. I don't Bobby will have to figure that out for us. That's above my pay grade. But there's this story that we know in the Gospel of John, where Jesus is returning to Jerusalem, and he goes by a healing pool, which is cool. There it is. That outside of this religion and outside of this tradition, forever people have gathered around sacred bodies of water for healing. Actually, a lot of our springs here in Florida, people used to travel from all over the country to bring sick people here so they could bathe in the springs, which is a sort of baptism in and of itself. So I'm just going to read this story. And then we can sit with it for a minute and see if it has anything for us. This is John chapter 5. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida. Bethsaida. Anybody got that one? Bethsaida. Bethsaida. I don't see Bethsaida. Thanks, Don. Which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Sounds like it would be a kitchen utensil or something. I don't know. Anybody know what a colonnade is? Like a column, I'm guessing. That's some SAT prep homework there. Okay. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" And the man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Classic Jesus. We were driving the other day, Bobby and I, somewhere, and there's a sign on some church nearby that says, "Fall for Jesus, he never leaves." And I started laughing. Like, there's like 20 stories where he bails right in the middle of all the drama. He like gets things going, and then he slips out the back. So I don't know, he was a mischievous character, that one. You shouldn't try to pin him down, But later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. It's always important for me to remember that sinning and sin, hamartano, is separateness. Whenever I see words like that in this book, remembering that Jesus isn't saying it's your fault that you are lying there sick, but that you can go now and be healed. And so as we do these next few weeks, and we have our wonderful leader back to guide us deeper into baptism, I guess all I want to leave you with is that for me it marked a radical moment where something different, something peaceful, where sanity and connection to divine energy became more regularly available. But it also became a walk into the wilderness. And it's like the real stuff that's holding us back from being in love and being in peace and being in joy all the time. That's stuff that we're clinging to. The water dislodges it. And then we get to walk in the wilderness together for a while. Oopsies. I think the coolest part of that story, what I come back to again and again and again, is Jesus saying, "Do you want to be well?" In other versions of that story, he lists all these reasons, all the people that are in his way, all the different things that stop him from getting to the pool. Just blame. I can't be at peace right now. I can't be calm. I have to be anxious because the politics or the finances or, the reasons go on and on and on and on. And Jesus just says to us, do you want to be well? You don't need to get into that pool. Just be well. So, we got about 8 minutes before the end of, if you have kiddos back there or squirrels or any children being taken care of, don't bring your pets to the childcare. Then you can slip out, but I think, we'll just have the communion table open and spend our last few minutes together in contemplation. I love being here with y'all. This is a really fun journey that we're doing here in this funky old movie theater. And it was so cool that last month we all figured out how to pitch in and make it stable, because if it was like, hanging by a thread and you put the second string guy in to cover a week, that would be a really risky move. Bobby's like, don't worry, you won't blow it, everything's fine, So yeah, I probably won't do this again for, 6 or 8 months. I'd prefer to just play the guitar and sing with you all. Such beautiful voices. Anyhow, this is from Christ the Eternal Tao, which is a really wonderful collection of language of this Christ story, but in kind of blended with the Tao Te Ching. I, love singing bowls and Eastern traditions and things like that. So those types of things interest you. I'm always delighted to chat about them. So I'll read this and then maybe just play some piano. We'll have some instrumental music and we can all, you can be dismissed. You can hang out for a while. Thanks for being with us this morning. He who bore the world's burden upon himself said, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Follow me, says the way, down into the deep pools of the valley, where the water ever empties itself, is ever emptied, yet ever full. Follow me like the stream unto the lowest place, the place all people disdain, and there you will find rest. Emptied, you will be ever full. If you have not found rest, that means you have not reached the lowest place. You have not lost everything, but are still on the slope of the valley, clinging with fear and bloody hands to the rough, brittle crags. Better then that you had not descended at all, but had remained on the surface. Count the cost. If you descend, you must descend with me all the way down, there to die that you may be born. For the way leads to eternity, said the ancient sage. And though your body ceases, you will not be destroyed. You are the mystery that is placed upon the Lord's table. You receive the mystery that is yourself. To that which you are, you will respond, Amen.